Why was she always the one left out of the circle? Why did every briefing end with her standing against the wall, listening to laughter that never included her name? The sun bled white across the Afghan mountains, the air so dry it cracked lips and burned throats. At Firebase Echo, Marines moved like clockwork, gears in a machine that ran without pause. Boots stamped through dust. Radios crackled. Orders were shouted, echoed, and obeyed. And in the middle of it all, just slightly apart, sat Master Sergeant Sarah Morgan. Ghost, they called her, not as a compliment. She was perched on a crate, rifle across her lap, cleaning it with the kind of patience that drove other people restless. Every motion measured, quiet, precise. At 5'4", with narrow shoulders under a tan blouse, she was smaller than most. Not weaker, just overlooked. Two sergeants passed by on their way to the armory, voices raised just enough to reach her ears. "There's our quota sniper," one muttered. "Paper shooter," the other smirked. "Good thing cardboard doesn't shoot back." They didn't slow down. They didn't expect her to answer. She didn't. The cloth kept moving down the length of her rifle's bore, steady, silent, controlled. She didn't fight back with words, never had. Insults, dismissals, sideways smirks, they slid off her like dust off steel. But they didn't disappear, she carried them, quietly, patiently. The rifle wasn't just a weapon to her. It was a language, a memory, a ledger of every breath she had measured, every heartbeat she had slowed to stillness. She recorded everything, humidity shifts, bullet drop, wind curves, into a little green notebook most thought was a grocery list. In neat handwriting, every calculation sat like scripture. And no one cared, not really. To most of the officers she was a checkbox, mascot, range score, never a sniper. Captain Reynolds had said it once, casual, like it didn't matter. "Morgan's good for the numbers, but keep her on comms. Make her useful." So she hauled gear, logged traffic, ran radios, and when Marines left the wire, she was politely told to stay in her lane. But what they didn't see was the long nights. When the smoke pits filled with laughter, Sarah unrolled maps under red light and memorized every contour. She drilled her breathing until her pulse obeyed her finger. She dry-fired until the click of the trigger felt like a second heartbeat. She wrote numbers into that green notebook until the ink smeared her fingertips. She wasn't waiting for permission. She was waiting for the inevitable. Because she knew, one day, the moment would come, and all the whispers, all the smirks would burn away in the scope's reticle. Her story didn't begin in Helmand. It began years earlier, in Redstone, Arizona. The horizon stretched forever there, flat farmland giving way to mountains painted red at dusk. Her father, William Morgan, was more than just a Marine. He had been CIA too, training Afghan fighters during the Soviet War. She never really knew how much of him belonged to her, and how much belonged to the shadows he lived in. But she knew his discipline. Chores at dawn, fences fixed before breakfast, and at night, empty soda cans lined up on fence posts, a battered rifle in her small hands. "Steady breath," he'd tell her. "Slow trigger, let the shot surprise you." By 12, she could knock down every can at 50 yards without missing. By 16, she outshot most of the men who came hunting with her father. He didn't praise her with words, but his eyes, steady, proud, told her she was his mirror. He taught her to read the land, to know wind by the way grass bent, to measure distance without tools, to breathe like the tide, steady, endless. But he also taught her something else, something darker. The Soviets thought Afghanistan would be easy, he told her once, rifles spread across the porch table. They thought numbers beat patience. They forgot what determination looks like. And then one day he was gone. She was 17 when two officers came to the door, hats in their hands, voices too formal, too rehearsed. Ambush. No body recovered. He died serving his country. She didn't cry in front of them. She just stood there, staring at their lips, trying to memorize every syllable like proof that this was real. 3 months later she enlisted, not to honor him, not fully, but to understand, to step into the same shadows that had swallowed him. And she carried his lessons like dog tags around her heart. But here in Helmand, those lessons didn't matter, not to her chain of command. Credentials meant nothing. She was too small, too quiet, not combat material. So she waited, patient, quiet, a ghost in her own unit. Until the day, an old man walked into Firebase Echo. Lieutenant Colonel James Harlow, 68 years old, moved like a man who'd lived enough not to waste steps. His face looked carved from stone, lined by decades of Cold War silence and blood. Most Marines saw just an old officer with ribbons. Sarah saw something else, the way his eyes never stopped moving, scanning doors, exits, threats. He noticed her first at the range. She wasn't performing for anyone, just drilling. 20 shots, 20 targets, each at a different distance, methodical, patient. When she finished, he was behind her, binoculars in hand. "Grouping at 800 is tight," he said. "No introduction, no smile. But you're compensating too much for drift." "Wind's coming off the mountains, sir," she answered, guarded. "Not at this hour." He handed her the binoculars. "Valley creates a countercurrent, ghost wind. You can't see it, only feel it." She adjusted, fired. The shot landed dead center. Harlow nodded once, then walked away. No praise, just acknowledgement. That night, as she cleaned her rifle, he returned, sat across from her, silent at first, just watching. "Then, you're William Morgan's daughter." Her hands paused, then kept moving. "You knew my father." "Berlin, then Afghanistan. He had patience. You have his patience." Her throat tightened. No one at Firebase Echo had ever mentioned her father's name, not once. Most people said she had his eyes. Harlow said eyes didn't make a sniper, patience did. And then he said something else, something she would replay in her mind for hours after. "Your father saved my life in Kandahar. Soviet Spetsnaz had us cornered. He took a night shot at 900 meters, no night vision. Impossible, but he proved there are no impossible shots, only unprepared shooters." For the first time since her father's death, Sarah felt something she'd been starved of for 16 years. Recognition. Not from men who dismissed her, not from officers who mocked her size, but from someone who had stood beside her father, who understood what patience meant. And in that moment, something inside her shifted. She wasn't just a ghost anymore. She was William Morgan's daughter. But she had no idea, none, that this quiet recognition was only the beginning. That in a matter of days, 480 Marines would be walking into a valley they'd never walk out of, unless she broke every order, every protocol, every silence she had endured. And the world would finally see what a ghost could do. Why did they laugh when she spoke? Why did the room fall into that heavy silence, like her voice didn't belong? The map spread across the table glowed under fluorescent lights. Shakur Valley, a winding scar through the mountains, steep ridges, narrow choke points. Colonel Richards tapped the map with a laser pointer. His voice was clipped, sure of itself. "Intelligence indicates a weapons cache here. Taliban stockpiling resources. 480 Marines with attachments will sweep, secure, and deny." Officers nodded. Marines shifted in their seats. Routine. Another valley, another sweep. But Sarah's eyes traced the contour lines. The ridges funneled down like jaws. The exits were thin, fragile threads. The terrain screamed something else. Kill zone. Her hand lifted before she could stop it. "Sir," she said, "these choke points, if hostile forces occupy the ridge, the convoy will be pinned. Minimal cover, restricted air support. This looks like a textbook ambush site." The room stilled. For a moment she thought maybe they'd see it. Maybe they'd hear the tremor of urgency in her voice. Colonel Richards blinked at her. "Thank you for your concern, Sergeant." His tone was flat. "Intelligence has vetted this. These weapons are fueling attacks. We won't pass it up because of hypothetical scenarios." "With respect, sir." Hypothetical, he repeated harder. Captain Reynolds leaned in with a smirk. Sergeant Morgan tracks equipment requisitions, not strategy, above your pay grade. Laughter broke the silence, not cruel, just dismissive, familiar. She closed her notebook, didn't argue again, but her gut tightened like wire. When the briefing ended, Marines joked about how quickly the sweep would finish. Weapons checked, radios packed, dust rose from boots. Sarah stood near the doorway, watching faces glow with confidence. None of them saw the trap yawning ahead. But someone did. From the corner in the shadow, Harlow's eyes found hers. No words, just a small nod. Then he disappeared into the hallway. Hours later, a folded note waited in her locker, precise handwriting. 2200 hours, bring your field book. The map room was dark when she entered, lit only by a single desk lamp. Harlow sat hunched over satellite images. His posture was heavy, like the years pressed against his shoulders. Close the door, Sergeant. She obeyed. Your assessment was correct, he said quietly. But this mission isn't about weapons caches, it's something else. He spread the photos across the table. Grainy satellite images, heat signatures moving through the valley at night, vehicles transferring crates. These aren't Taliban patterns, Sarah murmured. Because they're not Taliban, Harlow said. He slid a different photo forward. A man in civilian clothes stepping out of a compound. Poor quality, partially obscured, but something in his stance, the way he carried himself, was unmistakable. Facial recognition, 89% match. The next photo was old, edges faded. 3 men near a Soviet helicopter, 2 in Afghan clothing. The third in uniform, cold eyes, severe jaw. Nikolai Marov, Harlow said, his voice cut like gravel. Former KGB, supposedly dead since 2001, but intelligence suggests otherwise. He's been running Russian arms through Afghanistan. Sarah studied the face, and then the cold settled into her chest. What does this have to do with us? Harlow leaned forward. His weathered eyes met hers. Marov was your father's adversary. Their conflict became personal. Your father disrupted his operations again and again. Marov never forgave him. Her throat went dry. Are you saying? I'm confirming, Harlow said low. Your father's final mission intercepted a shipment Marov orchestrated. He was ambushed, killed, or so they told you. Her pulse thudded in her ears. You think someone leaked it? I know it, Harlow said. Your father found evidence of a mole. He died before he could expose it. And now, 16 years later, the same patterns are emerging. Same region, same enemy, different war. Marov wants revenge, not just on America, on your family. Sarah stared at the photos, the valley's ridges, the ambush waiting to spring. Her father's face flashed in memory, steady hands lining soda cans on a fence, and the ache of 17 years returned like a wound ripped open. Harlow, her voice was quiet. If you know this, why not tell Richards? Harlow's face hardened. Because Richards was there. He was a junior officer on your father's team, one of 3 people who knew the mission details. The implication landed heavy. Richards, the same man leading tomorrow's operation. Sarah's voice barely broke a whisper. You think he's compromised? I think history repeats, Harlow said. And I think tomorrow, when 480 Marines walk into that valley, they'll be walking into Marov's trap, unless someone intervenes. He reached beneath the desk, set a small case on the table, opened it. A pistol, old, Soviet-made, the kind of weapon her father might have touched in the 80s. This belonged to your father. He took it from a Soviet officer in 87. I've kept it for him. Her hand hesitated before lifting it. The weight was wrong, too heavy, too personal. Why are you telling me this? Because you see what others don't, Harlow said. His voice softened. Because when the moment comes, you'll need to take a shot no one else will believe possible, And because you're William Morgan's daughter." The silence hung between them, heavy, sacred. That night she lay in her bunk with the pistol on the table beside her. She flipped through her green notebook, lines of calculations glowing under red light. Wind, humidity, drop rates. The language her father had taught her, the language of patience. But her mind wouldn't stop replaying Harlow's words. Richards. Mole. Marov. Her father's death, less accident, more execution. The next morning broke with dust and engines. Convoy assembling, boots stomping, laughter, banter, bravado. 480 Marines climbing into trucks, weapons slung, confidence bright. She stood at her comm station, headset crackling with routine reports. Her notebook open, the valley sketched in pencil. Every contour line screamed the same warning: death trap. Engines roared. Colonel Richards gave final checks. The convoy rolled forward into the mountains. Sarah's pulse tightened. She leaned over her microphone. Recommend holding position until UAV confirms ridge signatures. Terrain ahead restricts maneuver options. Major Anderson, operations officer, cut her off with a glare. Sergeant Morgan, maintain protocol. You're not here for tactical analysis. Her jaw clenched. She forced herself back into silence. But her gut knew. The valley was waiting. And the ambush was already in motion. How long can a person sit still while others die? How long before silence turns into betrayal? The convoy rolled deeper into Shakur Valley. Engines droned against stone walls. Radios chattered with routine updates, fuel checks, position reports, the dull music of a machine in motion. Sarah sat in the operations center, headset pressing her ears, pen tapping her notebook. Each word from the convoy echoed against the map she'd studied. The contour lines weren't abstractions anymore. They were teeth closing around the Marines she listened to. Then it came, a clipped transmission, ragged with urgency. Firebase echo, this is actual, visual on multiple heat signatures North Ridge. Request UAV confirmation. The room stirred, screens flickered, officers leaned over keyboards redirecting drone assets. ETA, 20 minutes. Sarah's chest tightened. 20 minutes. In 20 minutes the convoy would be at the narrowest stretch, boxed by ridges on both sides. She keyed her mic, calm voice, professional tone. Recommend holding position until aerial confirmation. Terrain ahead restricts maneuver options. Anderson's head snapped toward her. Sergeant Morgan, maintain comm protocol. Sir, heat signatures match heavy weapons teams. Overlapping fields of fire. If the convoy advances. That's enough. His voice cracked like a whip. Stand down. Silence swallowed her. The next moment shattered it. Contact, contact. Heavy fire North Ridge, RPG South Slope. The radios erupted. Shouts layered over shouts. Gunfire bled through speakers, hollow and distant, like ghosts screaming from inside the valley. Screens lit with icons shifting, convoys compressing, vehicles maneuvering for cover. Firebase, this is Bravo 2, multiple casualties. Snipers taking out our officers. Need immediate air support. Anderson barked orders, voice hard but strained. Negative airstrike. Friendlies within 200 meters. Sarah stared at the screen. Her pencil hovered above her notes. This was it, the trap she'd seen. The one no one listened to, now it was real. Sir, she tried again, voice low but urgent. They're pinned. Only counter-sniper fire can disrupt command and control. Air support won't matter if... Anderson turned, full fury in his eyes. You want to single-handedly counter multiple sniper teams. Sergeant, return to your station. That's an order. The headset dug into her ears. The screams and gunfire kept coming, and she knew. If she obeyed, 480 Marines would die in a valley that had swallowed her father. Her fingers stilled, the decision crystallized. She removed her headset and walked out. No hesitation, no words, just motion. In the armory, she signed for her rifle, suppressor, ammunition, rangefinder, purpose, range qualification. The Marine on duty barely looked up. She loaded quietly, fingers moving like they had thousands of times in the dark. At the motor pool, a HMMWV idled. A young corporal sat behind the wheel. Supply run, routine. Sarah opened the passenger door. Change of plans. I need drop-off at observation post Falcon. Ma'am, I don't have orders for. This is time-sensitive, she said, eyes steady. She didn't raise her voice, didn't argue, just looked at him until his jaw flexed and he nodded. She climbed in. The engine growled. Dust swallowed the vehicle as it rolled toward the outer perimeter. From the shadows of a supply tent, Harlow watched her go. He didn't stop her, just gave the faintest nod. 20 minutes later, the corporal dropped her on a dirt track east of the valley. He hesitated, like he wanted to ask why. She spared him that wait. Report delivery complete. Return to base. He nodded, turned the wheel, and drove back into the dust. Now she stood alone. The mountains rose like knives around her. The sound of battle echoed faint across the stone walls, muffled thunder of gunfire, the sharp bark of RPGs. Sarah slung her rifle, tightened her straps, and began to climb. The slope was brutal. Loose shale shifted under her boots, every step sliding back half its length. The sun hammered her helmet. Heat seeped through her vest, turning each breath heavy. Her thighs burned. Her lungs scraped. But she climbed. Her father's voice whispered in memory. Terrain will kill you faster than any enemy. Respect it, read it, use it. She reached a depression near the ridge, dropped low, crawled forward. And then she saw it. The valley below writhed with chaos. The convoy scattered like ants across open ground. Burned-out vehicles coughed black smoke into the air. Marines huddled behind wreckage, trapped under fire pouring from both ridges. RPG trails streaked across the valley, detonating with sharp, vicious blossoms. But what froze her was the sniper fire. Not wild, not random, precise. Officers dropped mid-gesture, throats and temples blooming red. Units without leadership flailed, their formations collapsing under the rain of fire. Through her scope she scanned the northern ridge. There between rocks, a glint, spotter scope, firing position, professional setup, not insurgents, Russians. She steadied her breath. Calculated distance, 970 meters. Wind, 8 mph from the west. Temperature high. Drop compensation noted. Her father's voice again. Breathe like the tide, squeeze like you're holding someone you love. Gentle, certain. Her heart slowed. The world narrowed, the reticle hovered. She squeezed. The shot whispered across the valley. Through the scope she saw the sniper collapse, head snapping back. The spotter froze, confused, then dropped too. For a moment the valley paused. Marines raised heads. The systematic slaughter faltered. Unknown shooter, Eastern Ridge. A voice shouted over comms. We've got Overwatch. Sarah didn't answer. She shifted aim. Next target, machine gun nest cutting into the convoy. Adjust, fire, neutralized. Mortar team, fire, silence. Command element shouting orders. Fire, gone. With each shot the ambush unraveled. Where precision fire had pinned Marines, now chaos rippled through enemy lines. Her rhythm was methodical. Breath, pause, trigger, reset. But then movement on the far ridge, different from the others. Through her magnification she saw him. Military bearing, directing adjustments, authority in his posture. Nikolai Marov. Her father's ghost, flesh and blood. She adjusted her scope. Distance, 1,120 meters, beyond her rifle's effective range. Wind shift, northeast, 12 mph. Probability, low, very low. But her father's words burned through her veins. There are no impossible shots, only unprepared shooters. She steadied, controlled her pulse, began the ritual. Then movement again, parallel ridge, another sniper firing. Not at Marines, at Marov. The Russian staggered, wounded. His guards scrambled. Sarah froze, eyes narrowing on the unknown shooter. The technique, discipline, patient, with shot selection that echoed something she had seen before. Her father's training. But he was dead. Wasn't he? Below, Marines rallied. Coordinated movements replaced chaos. Her shots and the unknown snipers had shifted the tide. The convoy dug in, stabilized, prepared for air support. Still, Sarah's pulse thundered. She had saved them for now. But a new question burned hotter than the valley sun. Who was the ghost on the western ridge? And how did he shoot like William Morgan? Why was no one asking the question that haunted her? Why weren't they wondering who else was firing from the ridge? The valley was scarred black when the last shots faded. Burned trucks smoldered, heat shimmering above twisted steel. Marines dragged wounded from wreckage. Medics bent low in the dust, hands red, voices hoarse. Air support thundered in at last, jets carving contrails above the peaks, helicopters hovering like guardians. Too late to stop the ambush, just in time to keep it from finishing the job. Sarah lay still in her perch, cheek pressed against her rifle. The sun had dipped lower, shadows stretching long. Through her scope, she swept the western ridge where the unknown sniper had fired. Empty now, rocks, shadows, nothing human. She whispered into the silence, "Who are you?" No answer came but the wind. By nightfall, she returned to Firebase Echo. Dust clung to her uniform. Sweat carved salt tracks on her face. She walked through the gates alone, rifle slung across her chest, the green notebook tucked inside her vest. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Marines clustered in groups, trading fragments of what had happened. Whole valley lit up. Snipers everywhere. Then someone started picking them off from the East Ridge, saved our asses. She slipped past the chatter. Each word twisted inside her because they couldn't know, that the someone was her. In the operations center, Anderson stood stiff, jaw tight, headset pressed to one ear. When he saw her, his eyes narrowed. "Sergeant Morgan, report." She paused, every muscle still. "Sir." "You left your post during active engagement." His voice was low, clipped. "Explain." She steadied her breath. Comms were compromised. I attempted to re-establish field line of sight. Anderson's gaze bored into her. He didn't believe it, not fully, but no proof tied her to the shots. Not yet. "Do not repeat this," he said finally. "You're dismissed." She saluted, crisp and controlled, walked out before her pulse betrayed her. But that night, sleep didn't come. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, fingers brushing the old Soviet pistol Harlow had given her. Her father's ghost lingered in every shadow. Because she had seen the second sniper. Not clearly, not enough to name. But the rhythm, the precision, it wasn't insurgent, wasn't mercenary. It was familiar, terrifyingly familiar. And if her father was dead, what kind of man carried his echo in his trigger? The next morning, the base was a different world. Rows of body bags lay under tarps near the med station. 36 Marines dead, dozens wounded. The survivors moved like shadows, eyes hollow, jokes replaced by silence. Colonel Richard stood before them at formation. His voice was steady, but his hands twitched against the podium. "We were deceived," he said. "Intelligence underestimated enemy strength, but you held the line, you proved what Marines are, and you will honor the fallen by standing ready." The words rang flat. Sarah studied his face, the twitch, the too careful phrasing. Was this guilt, or was it fear? Later, Harlow found her by the range. She was shooting again, each round methodical, tearing the same hole larger. "You broke orders," he said, "not accusation, statement." She lowered the rifle, met his eyes. "I saved them." "Yes," his gaze softened, "but they'll come for you now." She waited, patient. Who was on the western ridge? His silence stretched long. Then finally, a question I've asked for years. You knew. I suspected. Men like Marov don't disappear without shadows following. If your father had survived, he stopped himself, looked away. No, I saw his body. Berlin, 1989, he's gone. But the doubt in his eyes betrayed him. She stepped closer, then who shot like him? Harlow didn't answer, but he touched her shoulder once firm, then walked away. That night, whispers spread across the base. Anderson questioning requisition logs, officers noting Sarah's absence during the battle, word that Richards wanted disciplinary review. The walls closed in. She went to the roof of the barracks, sat with her knees pulled to her chest, rifle across her lap. The Afghan sky burned with stars, clear, endless, uncaring. Her father's voice haunted her again. Patience is not silence, patience is timing. When the world refuses to listen, you wait, then you act. She whispered back into the night, I acted, was it enough? The next day answered her. Patrols returned bloodied, enemy pressure increasing. Intel reports hinted at coordinated resupply lines feeding into the valley, and at the heart of it, Marov. The name circulated in fragments, never official but always with a chill. Some called him myth, others ghost. To Sarah, he was the man who had killed her father. And then came the order. Colonel Richards, we move again in 72 hours. Same valley, full sweep, no hesitation. The silence in the room was suffocating. Marines exchanged uneasy looks. The wounds of the last mission hadn't closed, and already they were being sent back into the jaws. Sarah's heart sank. She saw the trap tightening again. Different day, same valley, same death waiting. When the briefing ended, she lingered, notebook pressed to her chest. Richards noticed. His eyes flicked to her, cold warning. Afterward, Anderson cornered her outside. His voice was low, venom under control. Whatever you did yesterday, stop. You think you saved them. All you did was raise questions. People are watching now. You won't get another chance. Her jaw clenched. She forced herself to nod, walked away before her anger showed. But inside, the decision was already made. She wouldn't let it happen again. Not to her battalion, not to the ghost she already carried. Even if it meant burning every order left. Why would they march into the same jaws twice? Why would anyone think death forgets so quickly? The valley still smelled of fire when they returned. Charred steel littered the ridges, black scars marking where trucks had burned. Ravens circled above, wings slicing the pale Afghan sky. 3 days, that was all. 3 days since the ambush, and now 400 Marines advanced again, boots crunching on gravel, rifles raised, eyes hard. Orders didn't argue, they just repeated sweep, clear, secure. Sarah wasn't in formation. She stood back at Firebase Echo, headset clamped over her ears, listening. The comms filled with clipped updates, every voice too calm. The silence beneath those voices said everything. They were afraid. Her green notebook lay open beside her. She traced contour lines again, pencil carving arcs of fire, dead ground, choke points. The valley hadn't changed. The trap was the same. Anderson loomed behind her, his presence pressed like a shadow. You'll stay put this time. Her jaw tightened. Sir, if ridges are occupied again. That's why we're bringing drones and artillery on standby, Anderson cut her off. Your role is comms, nothing else, understood. She didn't answer right away. He stepped closer. His voice dropped low, almost a growl. You disobey again, and I'll bury your career before the dust settles. Her throat worked. She forced the word understood. But inside, the word twisted. She understood nothing, except that 400 lives were walking into slaughter. The convoy rolled out. Engines drummed the earth. Dust rose like a curtain behind them. Sarah's chest clenched with every mile they pushed deeper into the valley. Half an hour in, radio chatter shifted. Movement North Ridge. Thermal shows multiple signatures, too spread to be decoys. Possible weapons emplacements, requesting confirmation. Sarah's pencil snapped in her fingers. Anderson's voice was flat, rehearsed. Maintain advance. Drone confirms no heavy concentrations. Sarah's voice broke out before she could stop it. Sir, thermal spread indicates flanking fire teams, not static defenders. They're layering positions. If we continue. Anderson's hand slammed the table. Sergeant Morgan, enough. The room fell silent. Radios hissed with static. Outside, the valley swallowed more Marines. She stared at the map, heart hammering. And then the first explosion ripped through the speakers. Contact, contact, RPG South Slope. Sniper fire, North Ridge, multiple casualties. The ambush had sprung again. Anderson barked orders. Artillery requests flew, drones redirected, but Sarah's gut knew the truth too late, again. Her body moved before her mind could argue. She tore off the headset and walked out. For the second time, she became a ghost. The armory air smelled of oil and steel. She loaded her rifle with hands steady as stone, suppressor screwed on, rangefinder clipped to her vest, notebook tucked inside her plate carrier. At the motor pool, she didn't wait for permission. She found an idle dirt bike, keys dangling from the ignition. Marines shouted as she kicked it alive. Dust exploded as the tires bit into gravel. She was gone before anyone stopped her. The valley greeted her with fire. Gunshots cracked off ridges. Smoke curled above wreckage. Radios screamed in fragments, carried faint through the din. She killed the engine short of the ridge and scrambled upward on foot. Shale tore her palms. Sweat stung her eyes. She crawled the last few yards, chest pressed to the earth. Through her scope, the ambush unfolded. Snipers pinned command elements. Machine guns chewed up cover. RPG trails streaked like comets. And then she saw him. Marov. Not through a grainy photo this time. Flesh and blood on the northern ridge, binoculars to his eyes directing fire. His bearing was unmistakable, calm amid chaos, as if he owned the valley itself. Her father's killer. Her pulse spiked, but her breathing slowed. She lined him up in the reticle. Distance, 1,100 meters. Crosswind, 10 mph. Probability, slim. Her finger rested on the trigger, steady. Then another crack echoed across the valley, a shot not hers. Marov staggered, grabbed his shoulder, ducked back into cover. She shifted her scope, scanning. There, western ridge, the second sniper. Her heart stuttered, his posture, his rhythm. He moved with the calm of a man who had lived decades through a rifle's glass. It was impossible. Her father was dead. She'd seen the officers at her door, the folded flag, the silence in her mother's eyes. And yet every shot he fired was her father's lesson, alive again. She froze. What if? The thought splintered. Gunfire ripped below. Marines pinned again. Reality clawed her back. She steadied her breath, took aim at another sniper nest, fired, shifted, fired again. Together, unknowingly, the two ghosts dismantled the ambush. One east, one west. Targets dropped in rhythm like an echo bouncing across the valley. Marines scrambled, rallied, returned fire with ferocity. The tide shifted again. But inside Sarah, nothing steadied. Who was he? A phantom, an ally, an enemy? When the ridge cleared, she stayed prone, staring across the expanse at the western rocks. Her scope swept back and forth, searching, pleading. But the ridge was empty. Only dust lingered where he had been. By nightfall, the valley was theirs again, casualties heavy but not annihilation, the ambush broken. Back at Firebase Echo, Anderson was waiting. His face was tight with fury. "You think I don't know?" he hissed, dragging her into the shadows near the motor pool. "2 ambushes, 2 times you vanish. 2 times some mystery shooter saves the day. Who else would it be?" Her silence was her only weapon. She met his eyes unflinching. He leaned closer. His breath was hot, bitter. "You're finished. Maybe not today, but soon you'll pay for this." He walked away, leaving the threat heavy in the air. Sarah stood alone in the dark, rifle slung across her chest, notebook pressed against her vest. The valley had given her no answers, only deeper questions. Marov lived. The sniper on the western ridge lived. And somewhere in the shadows, her father's ghost was either gone forever or closer than she had ever dared believe. Why did silence weigh more than truth? Why did speaking feel more dangerous than the bullets she'd faced in the valley? The base was quieter after the second ambush. Not peace, never that, but a hush made of grief and suspicion. Marines moved slower, eyes dulled by fatigue. 30 more dead, too many wounded, and still the valley loomed unswept, unsilenced. Sarah walked the rows of cots in the medical tent, her boots soft against dirt floors. Marines looked up as she passed. Some nodded, some whispered. A few reached out, brief touches to her sleeve, silent acknowledgments. She hadn't told them it was her rifle. She hadn't said she'd been on the ridge. But Marines talk. They noticed who wasn't in the ops center when the shots came. They noticed who returned with dust on her boots and silence in her eyes. And though Anderson hadn't proved it, suspicion was a fire he kept stoking. That evening he cornered her again, this time not in shadows but in Harlow's presence. "Colonel Richards wants answers," Anderson snapped. 2 engagements, both times Morgan disappears, both times a ghost sniper saves what's left of us. Coincidence? I don't think so. Harlow's gaze was steady, unreadable. "And what do you propose, Major?" "Disciplinary review, removal from comms, restriction to base perimeter." Anderson's voice carried weight, now formal, rehearsed. "She's a liability." Sarah's jaw locked. She wanted to shout, to point at the map and scream that she'd saved them, that if not for her rifle the casualty rows would have doubled. But Harlow spoke first. "Liability," his voice was gravel, "or asset you can't control." Anderson bristled. "Colonel Richards agrees." "I've known William Morgan's bloodline longer than you've been shaving," Harlow cut him off. "If Sarah disobeyed, it wasn't recklessness, it was necessity." The silence cracked sharp. Anderson's eyes flared with something darker than anger, hatred. "This isn't over," he said low. "Not for her, not for you." He stormed out, boots slamming the dirt. Harlow turned to her. His expression was heavy, lined with years of knowing too much. "You're out of time, Sarah. They'll move against you soon." She steadied her breath, then let them. But when she lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, her calm broke. Every insult, every dismissal, every narrowed eye had been easier than this. The knowledge that her own chain of command wanted her gone. The Marines whispered she was their ghost guardian. Anderson whispered she was a rogue. Which truth would survive? The answer came faster than she expected. The next morning she was summoned to Richards' office. The air smelled of stale coffee and paper maps. Richards sat stiff behind the desk, Anderson looming at his shoulder. "Sergeant Morgan," Richards said, voice clipped. "You've been accused of insubordination, twice, walking off post during active engagements." Her spine straightened. "Sir, both times." "Both times," Richards cut her off, "Marines died. Both times questions arose. What were you doing on those ridges?" Her mouth dried. She looked from Richards to Anderson. Anderson's smirk was faint but poisonous. Richards leaned forward. "I should end your career here, strip your rank, send you home in disgrace." Her chest tightened, but then his eyes narrowed, studying her. "And yet," he said slower, "my Marines whisper that someone saved them, that without a rifle from the East Ridge none of them would be here to complain. Explain that." Sarah's heartbeat thudded. The room was silent except for the hum of the ceiling fan. She spoke carefully. "Sir, if someone fired from the ridge, then that's what matters, that Marines lived." Anderson snapped. Deflection, she admits nothing, she. "Enough," Richards barked. His eyes stayed on Sarah, hard, searching. At last he leaned back. You will remain at Echo, restricted to base. No field movement without direct orders. Dismissed. The verdict was both a cage and a reprieve. She saluted, turned, and walked out, every muscle rigid. But outside, Marines waited. They looked at her differently now. Some with suspicion, yes, but others more looked with gratitude, quiet nods, silent respect, the kind that didn't need words. Anderson saw it too, and his jaw tightened with rage. That night Harlow found her again. They sat in the dim glow of the range lights, rifles resting across their laps. You're boxed, Harlow said. They'll strip you piece by piece, unless... Sarah's eyes narrowed. Unless what? Unless you take this further. Richards isn't just careless, he's compromised. Marov's too close, too prepared, someone's feeding him. And Anderson, Harlow's mouth twisted, he's protecting Richards, maybe more. The weight of the words sank in. Betrayal wasn't abstract anymore. It was here in her chain of command. Her voice was low, and the sniper on the western ridge. Harlow's eyes flickered. For once, uncertainty showed. If he's who I fear, then this runs deeper than you know. She pressed, who do you fear? Harlow didn't answer, just stood, leaving her alone under the humming lights. Sleep was impossible. She climbed to the roof again, notebook in hand. Stars burned cold above. She traced calculations she already knew, her pencil carving grooves into paper. But her thoughts circled the same orbit. Marov, Richards, Anderson, and the phantom who shot like her father. At dawn, she made her decision. Restriction meant nothing if she refused to be caged. If no one else would expose the truth, she would. Not for her career, not even for her battalion. For her father, for every ghost that Valley had claimed. She closed the notebook, the last line underlined twice. Patience is timing. Timing is survival. Then she whispered to the empty morning, I'll act. What does loyalty mean when the leaders themselves betray it? What oath survives when the chain of command is rotten? The restrictions meant nothing. A cage is only real if you choose to sit inside it. Sarah wasn't built to wait while men like Richards and Anderson fed Marines into fire. 2 nights after her reprimand, she moved. The base slept fitfully, generators humming, boots crunching in midnight patrols. Sarah slipped from her barracks, rifle slung, notebook pressed against her chest. Her breath fogged in the cool desert air. She didn't walk toward the motor pool, didn't risk another direct escape. Instead, she followed the wire fence to a blind spot she'd memorized months ago. The guards never checked it. The cameras had a dead zone where 2 floodlights overlapped. On her stomach, she slid under, scraping her vest against dirt. She rolled into shadows on the far side. Then she rose, running low toward the mountains. Her destination wasn't the valley this time. It was a half-collapsed compound west of Firebase Echo, a place Harlow had once marked on a map only in passing. He'd called it an old echo chamber. She hadn't asked what he meant then, but now she needed answers. Inside, dust-coated broken furniture, papers scattered by years of wind. She swept her light across faded Soviet graffiti, rusted shell casings, and finally, a steel cabinet half buried in rubble. The lock was broken. Inside, plastic binders warped with mildew. She pulled one out, flipping pages stiff with age. Russian. Names, numbers, shipment logs. Her eyes froze on one. Marov, 1989, Shakur Valley. And below it, an American name. Richards. Her pulse hammered. The entries weren't chance. They described transfers, meetings, payments. Richards had been part of it, not just a careless officer, a collaborator. Her breath came shallow. The ambush hadn't been failure. It had been design. Richards wasn't walking Marines into danger out of arrogance. He was walking them in to feed Marov. A sound cracked the silence behind her, the scrape of boot on stone. She spun, rifle raised. Harlow stepped into the light. His weathered face was unreadable. "You weren't supposed to find that yet," he said quietly. Her finger tightened on the trigger. "You knew." His eyes didn't flinch. "I suspected. Proof was harder until now." The weight between them shifted. She lowered the barrel an inch, though her hands shook. "If Richards is compromised," she said, her voice hoarse, "then Anderson." "His shield," Harlow finished. "They've built a pipeline for years. Marov feeds him information. Richards feeds him Marines." Her stomach turned. All the whispers, all the dismissals, her father's death. It wasn't incompetence, it was betrayal carved into orders. Harlow moved closer, slow, deliberate. "You can't confront him directly. Not yet. You'd vanish before morning. But if you want to finish what your father started." He stopped, his eyes softened. "Then you need to be ready for the truth." Her throat tightened. "The sniper." Harlow's silence was answer enough. She whispered fragile, "Is it him?" Harlow looked away. His jaw worked. "I buried William Morgan, or thought I did. If he's alive, he's something else now. Something war left behind." Her knees threatened to give. The thought was too sharp, too impossible. Her father alive, firing across the valley. Why hadn't he come home? Why hadn't he told her? Harlow placed a hand on her shoulder, steady. "Sometimes survival demands disappearance. If he lives, you'll see him soon. But be careful what you wish for." A sound broke them. Distant engines, trucks in the valley, another convoy. Sarah's chest seized. Richards was moving again, feeding more Marines into Marov's hands. She turned, grabbing the binder, tucking it under her vest. Her voice was steel. "I'm done waiting." She ran into the night. By dawn, the convoy had entered Shakur Valley again. This time with fewer numbers, 200 Marines, stripped-down mission. Anderson rode at the front, face hard. From the ridge, Sarah watched through her scope. Rage coiled in her chest. This wasn't a mission. It was slaughter dressed as orders. Enemy fire opened with brutal precision. RPGs, machine guns, snipers. The convoy erupted in flames. Sarah didn't hesitate. She settled prone, reticle finding targets. Breath, pause, trigger, again, again. Her shots cracked through the chaos, cutting snipers from ridges, silencing machine guns. Marines below shouted in confusion and hope, "The ghost's back." But across the valley, on the western ridge, another rifle sang, in rhythm with hers, matching cadence. Her eyes locked through glass. For a fleeting second she caught a silhouette, broad shoulders, steady posture. The way he braced his rifle, the calmness in every squeeze. It was him, it had to be. Her chest broke. She almost called out, though the valley was too wide, almost spoke his name. But then movement below caught her scope. Marov. Alive, still orchestrating. His arm in a sling, face pale but furious, shouting orders to his men. Her father's killer, her phantom's prey. She lined him in her reticle. Distance, 1,300 meters, crosswind harsh, probability low. She steadied anyway, whispered into the scope, for him, for every one of them. But before she squeezed, another shot cracked from the western ridge. Marov's guards fell, then another, and another. The phantom was cutting a path straight to him. Her finger froze. If the phantom was her father, was she stealing his vengeance, or would he steal hers? The valley thundered with fire, Marines rallying, enemies breaking. Sarah's scope trembled between Marov's face and the silhouette of the sniper on the far ridge. Two ghosts, two targets, two truths colliding. She chose breath, patience, timing, and waited for the shot that would decide everything. How do you take a shot when your heart trembles harder than your hands? How do you breathe when the past is staring back at you through a rifle's glass? The valley was fire again. Marines pinned, shouts crackling over radios. RPGs hissed into the dust. Smoke coiled above the ridges. Sarah lay prone, cheek pressed to her stock. In her scope, two figures owned her sightline. Marov below orchestrating chaos with his one good arm, and on the far ridge the phantom sniper, steady, calm, each shot precise, cutting through enemy lines with impossible familiarity. Her father's ghost. Her chest ached so hard it almost broke her stillness. Every lesson he'd ever given her lived in that man's posture. The way he braced the rifle against stone, the rhythm of his squeeze, even the stillness between shots, patient, certain, merciless. She whispered, "Dad," though no one could hear her. The reticle floated over Marov's head. Distance, 1,300 meters, drop calculated, wind gauged, probability slim. Her finger rested, her pulse steadied. Then through the scope she saw the phantom adjust. He was aiming at Marov too. Two rifles, two ghosts, one target. The crack came first from the western ridge. Marov jerked, staggering, blood spraying from his shoulder. Not fatal, not yet. Sarah exhaled, squeezed. Her round hit a breath later, catching his leg, driving him to his knees. The valley held its breath. Marov, crippled, bellowed orders that no one obeyed. His men faltered, watching their commander collapse. Sarah lined up again, the kill shot. But in her scope something shifted. Anderson. He was in the valley near the command vehicle, headset on, screaming into radios. And his eyes through the glass, she swore she saw them flick toward Marov. Not fear, recognition. Her stomach twisted. Proof wasn't ink on a page anymore. It was flesh and betrayal, living and breathing in the same valley where her father had died. Her breath stilled. She could take Marov, end the ghost of her father's killer, or she could take Anderson, end the betrayal feeding it all. Her finger trembled. Then the phantom shot cracked again, not at Marov, at Anderson. The major dropped, skull shattered, headset falling into dust. Sarah froze. The phantom had chosen for her. Marov clawed to his feet, blood pouring from shoulder and leg. He tried to rally his men, but the sight of Anderson's body broke them. Confusion swept their lines. Retreat began. Sarah steadied one last time. "For my father," she whispered. The reticle found Marov's chest. She squeezed. The shot was clean, certain. Marov dropped face first into the dirt, body still at last. Silence swept the valley. Then shouts. Marines surged, emboldened. Enemy fire broke, scattered into retreat. The ambush crumbled like dust in wind. Sarah lowered her rifle. Her hands shook now, the tremor of release after hours of stillness. She blinked against tears, the valley blurring into haze. When she looked again, the western ridge was empty. The phantom was gone. Back at Firebase Echo, chaos turned to reckoning. Richards was nowhere to be found. His quarters stripped bare. His name vanished from rosters. He had fled, leaving Anderson's corpse as his shield. Whispers spread like wildfire. Marov's dead. The ghost sniper saved us again. Morgan's fingerprints are all over this. No one confronted her, not directly, but eyes followed her everywhere. Gratitude, fear, suspicion. That night Harlow came to her bunk. He carried no files, no orders, just a look she couldn't read. "You finished it," he said. Her throat tightened. "Then why doesn't it feel finished?" Harlow sat beside her. His voice was low. "Because vengeance isn't closure, and ghosts don't vanish when you kill their shadows." She swallowed hard. The sniper, was it him? For the first time, Harlow's composure cracked. His eyes softened with something almost tender. "I don't know," he admitted. "But if it was, maybe he gave you what he couldn't give himself." She closed her eyes. The shots replayed in her mind. The rhythm, the precision, her father's lessons alive in another man's rifle. Why hadn't he come to her? Why fire from the shadows and vanish again? The questions carved deeper than answers could ever fill. Days later, a supply convoy found Richards, body 30 miles north, execution style. No insignia, no explanation, just silence. Marines whispered that the ghost had finished him. Sarah never spoke against it. because some truths weren't meant for reports. Some belonged only to the dirt, the mountains, and the rifles that had sung their final songs. She left Firebase Echo months later. Orders sent her stateside. Commendations came with careful omissions. Words like discipline issues hid between lines of valor and sacrifice. None of it mattered. On her last night, she stood at the range alone. The desert air was cool, stars burning above. She opened her notebook, flipped to the last page. The ink was smudged, the paper soft with use. She wrote only one line, her father's voice in her hand. Patience is timing, timing is survival. She closed the book and whispered into the night to whatever ghost might hear, "I'll wait." The wind answered, gentle, endless, like a breath between shots. Because sometimes vengeance speaks with noise, but dignity doesn't speak at all. It simply acts.